We are talking Watchers 3 from 1994, directed by Jeremy Stanford. And this, unlike the second Watchers movie, is actually a direct sequel to its predecessor. Now, the first two Watchers movies were primarily based on the novel by Dean Koontz, and essentially the second one was not a sequel to the first, it was just a readaptation. Now, in that particular movie, we were introduced to Ferguson, who is an ex-military guy, and he was the main character out of the second movie. In the second one, he was played by the Beastmaster, Mark Singer. However, we have the same character in this third movie, except this time played by Wings Hauser. Ironically, Hauser and Singer both were in Beastmaster 2, playing brothers. Anyway, so this movie picks off essentially, I think, 4 or 5 years after the end of the second movie. Now, in the second movie, the character of Ferguson was a military prisoner, and obviously he is now in prison at the beginning of this movie, we assume for his original crime, plus probably the shenanigans that went on in the second movie. And he is, you know, in prison doing his time when he is plucked by a military type to go on a black ops mission because of his prior experience to dealing with the outsider, who is the creature ultimately. Now, at this point, he doesn't actually know that he's going to be facing this creature again. He just knows if he does this mission, he'll be able to kind of like get out of prison. So he and a couple of other convicts who are in the same boat, kind of military, who are now serving in prison, all get the same offer to essentially go into a jungle where they are not supposed to be and, you know, recover intel, survivors, that sort of thing. And very much like Predator, you know, we have a group of kind of combatants who they are. It ultimately ends up kind of like having that kind of human antagonist initially, but of course we know that there's a serious kind of new threat in the form of the outsider, this monstrous beast who has a psychic link to a dog. Now our team ends up having to fight this kind of creature out in the jungle, and just like Predator, they pick up a native kind of like from that kind of area, and this kind of creature ends up picking them up one by one, and then the hunter becomes the hunted. The only added kind of wrinkle in this one, of course, this time there is a super intelligent golden retriever along for the ride as well. So let's talk about what I think works. Now, if you like Predator and you like B movies, you'll probably like this one because it's more or less the same film. And we're going to come on to that again. Now, a lot of criticism is levelled at this movie because it is such a blatant rip-off of Predator, and that is true. You know, this movie really is. It takes direct kind of quotes from Predator. It kind of recreates sequences from Predator. So, yes, we'll come on to that again, but, you know, it still has that same basic kind of story structure, which I've got to say, even though it is a rip-off, I still kind of enjoyed it. It's still kind of a fun premise. And I do like the fact we actually have a continuation from the kind of this second film. And it does pick up the fact that obviously the Ferguson, who was originally already a kind of a military type, kind of suits quite well this particular kind of role here. And obviously we have the same dog, Einstein, who was in the second film. And we're led to believe it's the same creature as well, even though it looks completely different. And, you know, it kind of ignores the fact that it was defeated in the end of the second movie, but whatever. Yeah, so this is a lot more action heavy. It plays a lot more like Predator. I would say out of the 3 Watchers movies I've seen so far, I've yet to see the 4th one. This is the goriest. There are some fairly good practical effects in regards to wounds inflicted on different people. These movies they've all been reasonably kind of like violent and stuff like this, but I'd say this one has the kind of the most realistic effects to a certain degree. So I thought that was, and again, it's taking props from Predator, which was of course a pretty violent movie in its own right, and so it's kind of leaning very much like into that one. And of course we get a lot more kind of gunplay, a lot more kind of explosive action with this one as well. And it all takes place in the kind of the natural environment, obviously the kind of jungle kind of setting, so you do get a lot, mainly external shots. So it does look pretty good, I have to say. It's relatively kind of well filmed. A lot of criticism has also been levied at the actual design of the creature, which looks a lot different. It looks more like a xenomorph in this one, or more of an obscure reference. If you've ever seen the Lost in Time, there's actually a parody sequence in that of the aliens, and it actually looks more like the creatures from that parody. But that is a pretty obscure reference. The only thing with this creature is that I think looks a little weird is its eyes, which we'll come on to. But the actual design itself is far more kind of monstrous than either of the previous two kind of Watcher movies, all of whom the creature is seemed to be vastly kind of different. And with this one, again, you don't have quite the same kind of setup with the kind of the intelligent jog. It's somewhat assumed you kind of know already about what's actually kind of going on. So we spend less time with the kind of the setup, and it kind of gets more in the kind of the action here. You know, we'll talk about Wings Hauser. I think he does okay here. I don't think he's quite as believable as a kind of a military commando as Mark Singer would have been in this role. He looks a bit more like your dad at the end of the day, but you know, I think he does okay. The rest of the cast, to be honest with you, are relatively kind of forgettable. I mean, we get a couple of our kind of other commandos. One's a coward, one's a kind of like a potential rapist, the other one is kind of like the good guy. So yeah, they're all kind of somewhat kind of broad in their stereotypes, but there's, you know, they're still somewhat kind of memorable, I would say. And it's certainly the most action-packed out of the three Watcher movies that I have seen. So what doesn't work? So, you know, I've kind of touched on some of this already. I don't think Wings Hauser is quite as believable as this kind of commando kind of character as Mark Singer would have been. I think physically he kind of looks a little bit just like a little bit more like your dad, as I've said. And I don't know, I think Mark Singer was just better suited to that role, so it's a shame he didn't come back from this one. I don't think Hauser does a bad job, however. I don't think he just is a little bit miscast. And as I mentioned, the rest of the cast are a little bit kind of forgettable. I think probably the biggest critique that this will be levelled at this movie, and it's a fair critique, although it doesn't bother me as much, it is such a rip-off of Predator. I mean, I've seen movies that are kind of mockbusters, but this one literally kind of recreates sequences from Predator, even like lines of dialogue. So it is so blatant. You know, even down to the kind of the ending where we have to use kind of more traditional kind of style weaponry to fight it and stuff. It's very, very kind of similar in so many ways. It really doesn't going to deviate from all that much at all. And you know, again, the creature here. It looks, I personally think the creature looks better, to be honest with you, with the one exception. It has these kind of big bulbous eyes, which they've obviously designed to kind of look around. Because one of the kind of the features of this Watcher is it kind of takes the eyes of its victims, and that was obviously a kind of feature of this kind of creature in its past films, and as such the eyes are quite important. So they've obviously tried to make it a mask where the eyes can kind of look around, but ultimately it looks a bit stupid. But if you can kind of ignore the eyes, you know, just kind of the rest of it I think looks okay. I mean, there are a couple of sequences where you'll see like its fingernails like wobble around like they're rubber, which they obviously are, and things like that. So there is a little bit of kind of deficit to detail there, to be brutally honest. But overall, I think this creature looks a little bit more designed than kind of maybe the other two, where I think the creature design wasn't the strongest, let me just say. But you know, that's kind of somewhat of a kind of a personal opinion here. I do feel this movie has some logic issues. I mean, it doesn't really make sense why this kind of government would send the Wings Hauser character to this kind of place, obviously knowing that he already kind of knows a little bit about it. Maybe they kind of wanted just to kind of like to kill him off, but it just seems like, why don't just send someone who doesn't know what they're doing and doesn't know anything about it, and like that kind of thing, and like surely there'd be easier ways to sort of kill him off. So it seems that there are some kind of sillier elements here, unfortunately. Yeah, so it ends up being a little bit kind of more in the B movie kind of category than obviously Predator. You know, it's ultimately a little bit on the lower budget side as well. So again, that kind of does come through. There is a lot more hardware and explosions and stuff like that. But yeah, it does sometimes kind of like clearly kind of buckle under the kind of the lower budget here. But overall, I had to be honest with you, I still actually quite enjoyed this one. It's certainly not as polished as the first movie, which was made as a kind of a theatrical movie, and it clearly has a better kind of technical team behind the cameras and stuff. But I would say it's more, it's certainly a more fun, schlocky movie in some ways, and I think it's better than the second one, and probably as good, but maybe in different ways to the original. So I'll give this one a 6 out of 10, which is kind of going against the grain, because this one is actually the worst rated out of the original 3 on things like IMDb, but I kind of liked it. I thought it was kind of fun. I kind of quite enjoyed it. It kept my attention. I was engaged in this story because I kind of like Predator. Predator's one of my favourite films, and I'm not obliged to having like fun rip-off versions. So it's a 6 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? And what is your favourite Watcher film? I've yet to see the 4th one, but maybe we'll give the series a little bit of a break now. Anyway, please do let me know. 6 out of 10 for me, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.